Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. This is Some Christian Guy, and as always you can find me on Facebook, YouTube, One Way, and now on BitChute as well. And I welcome you. Welcome you back. Sorry for those of you, I've been releasing quite regularly videos of late. And some of you might have noticed, if you watched my last video, my voice was rubbish. My voice is still rubbish. I've come out of a week-long battle with bronchitis, which has been glorious. It's awful. And so that's why I haven't released any more prior to today. And even though I'm not 100%, I thought, well, I'm feeling good enough. I'm already back at work now, and so on and so forth. So that's that. So if I've got a awful cough, so if I still cough and stuff, please bear with me on that particular regard. So today we are going to be dealing with then obviously the next one. Now this is number 9. Okay, this is going to be number 9. And the reason for that, if I take you to the source, is because number 9 in the thing is basically a duplicate of number 7. So number 10 is now number 9, basically. So that's why. Anyway, so the question is, the contradiction is basically, when did Absalom rebel against David? That is the question. This, as far as they're concerned, there's some sort of contradiction here, and so on and so forth. Now, as we usually do, let's first establish something. Just for those of you that have picked up on this, this is what the Bible's used for. For some reason, I keep saying it's in James, but it's not in James, it's in Timothy. So for those of you that might have picked up on it and stuff like that, I've said James in other books, in other videos, but it's not James. So this is what the scripture is for. This is what the Bible says the scripture is for. All scripture is God breathed, useful for teaching, rebuking, correcting, training in righteousness, so that the servant of God may be thoroughly equipped for every good work. Right? At no point in the Bible does it say that this is a scientific document, that this is some exhaustive historical document or genealogical document, or whatever the case might be. This is a religious document. But that said, obviously it's going to have some overlap, etc., on scientific facts and historical facts and stuff like that. There will overlap, obviously, right? Because if someone says, well, God created in 7 days, then that obviously is going to come into contention with someone that wishes to say that the earth is millions of years old, and so on and so forth. So there is overlap, but its primary focus is not to come and elucidate the mysteries of science or the mysteries of whatever the case might be. It's merely people in their individual situations just telling it how they saw it, and so on and so forth. And now this question, how if we go back, pardon me, if we go back there, how old, not that's the wrong one. When did Absalom rebel against David? Okay, when did Absalom rebel against David? So is this, as we always try to establish, if we had to grant, right, out of hand, that this was a contradiction, would it affect or impede, or whatever the case might be, what the passage in Timothy is talking about, and how Christians actually use the Bible? And the reason why I want to establish this always is because a lot of specifically Protestants and evangelicals, you don't really get this. You don't actually really get this with the Orthodox, and you don't really get this with the Catholics necessarily, because they've got other systems. But the Protestants go very, very much overboard with the whole idea of like sola scriptura and things like that, where they unnecessarily see that the Bible, they take the idea of biblical infallibility far beyond what it's actually its remit and its mandate and stuff like that. They don't treat it in the proper way that you sort of tend to find in Catholicism and in Orthodoxy, where basically Protestants say, oh, sola scriptura and all that kind of stuff, and they sort of reject the authority of the church. But at the end of the day, it was the church that put the Bible together, right? So, and prior to that, there was no scripture, right? So we need to be a little bit more sober and a little bit more yeah, even-handed, right, about these kinds of things. So I don't want, so for my purposes, and I'm not here representing any particular Protestant belief or anything, even though I am an Adventist. I have my own mind and so on and so forth, and it's not like this is even a settled issue necessarily. Even within our church, sometimes people they discuss these things and it still goes on. But anyway, so it is my position to let the Bible speak for itself, and not take it further than what it says it's there for, and not use it less than what it says it's there for, right? So for doctrine, reproof, all that kind of stuff, all of those things, if we grant that this is a contradiction, would it affect what the Bible is designed to do? The answer is no. Okay, even if there was a contradiction. So I know when the atheists make these objections, right, about contradictions and all that kind of stuff, one thing that atheists have failed to recognize is not everyone, in fact, the majority of Christendom, if I use Christendom, so to include Catholics, to include the Orthodox, to include the whole 2,500 years of Christian history, and so on and so forth, when they say, oh, if there's so much even as the slightest contradiction or error in the Bible, therefore it's false, they're doing that because most atheists, they have no exposure to Orthodoxy, to Catholicism even necessarily, and they have no knowledge about how the texts came about or anything about church history. So the fact of the matter is that when they're making this objection, they're mostly objecting to the stance that a lot of Protestant denominations take on it, right? So essentially, the entire question of there being contradictions in the Bible is actually a little bit of a red herring, so to speak. Not necessarily, because it's obviously got to be mostly reliable if we're gonna base things on it. So it's not entirely a red herring, but in the manner in which they put the whole thing, it is a little bit of a straw man. It's like, listen, when you guys object and bring out all of these contradictions and stuff like that, you're dealing with it in a way that most Christians or most of Christianity generally doesn't deal in the way that we generally don't deal with the texts and stuff like that. So the atheist knee-jerk reaction to any discrepancy in the Bible is generally to the extreme, in the same way that a lot of Protestants take a lot of things to the extreme, sort of thing. So a lot of atheists like to think that they're sort of a bit better and more rational and even-headed than Christians are, but on this whole thing, they're generally going a little bit. They're throwing the baby out with the bathwater, in the same way many Protestants do. They take things way beyond what is actually called for, sort of throwing the baby out with the bathwater, as it were. Anyway, so let's go to the text, right? It lists the text over here. Samuel 15:7 and 2 Samuel 5:4. So there's a contradiction. That's where they say there's a contradiction, right? Let's have a squiz. Now, there's the first one. By the way, I'm including verse 17. I don't know why the atheist that put this together didn't include verse 17, because verse 17 happens to be important, right? Oh, whoops, wrong one. Verse 5. Okay, they only quote verse 4. I'm including verse 5, right? It just gives more information. It is pertinent, right? So here says, David was 30 years old when he became king, and he reigned a total of 40 years. Okay, so so he ceased being. So he was 70 years old, basically, when he was then no longer king, and then his son Solomon was his successor, right? So he reigned a total of 40 years in total, right? And those 40 years are split between two regions in Israel. So he reigned over Judah for 7 years and 6 months, and in Jerusalem he reigned over. So he only reigned over Judah for this period of time. Okay, so in Hebron he reigned over Judah for 7 years and 6 months, and then he moved over to Jerusalem, where he reigned over all of Israel and Judah. So the all of it. He became, it's almost, you've got an interesting situation here. But like if you go back to the Roman Empire, you had sort of the Eastern and the Western Roman Empire, and sometimes you had two emperors, and sometimes you had one emperor who was an emperor over both East and West. So it's a similar situation over here. He was first king over Judah, and then afterwards he was king over all of Israel and Judah at the same time, because there was a lot of splits, there was a lot of fighting and all that kind of stuff. A lot of things went on there. Okay, and it's just a bit of information. So 33 years there, and then 40 years in total. Okay, now over here I'm going to actually do this one over here, because this is where the contradiction comes in. And it came to pass after 40 years that Absalom said unto the king, I pray thee, let me go and pay my vow, which I have vowed unto the Lord in Hebron. Now, we need to understand that this is actually a contradiction, okay? So, dear atheists, there's finally a contradiction. Finally found one. Done. So this is the 9th one so far, and all of them have been absolutely ridiculous. But we actually have a contradiction here. So basically, if after 40 years, then Absalom, decided to rebel against the king, but David only reigned for 40 years, right? He only reigned 40 years. So he would have, after 40 years, because we know that Absalom was born when David was still in Judah, was still ruling over Judah, where he ruled for about 7 years. Absalom was born during that period of time. So from that time on, when he was born, plus 40 years, David wouldn't have been king anymore, right? So to say that after 40 years, that the beginning of Absalom's rebellion against his father David began is actually a contradiction. It actually is a contradiction. So it doesn't add up here. Now, but there is a caveat, and there is a how can you say? There is an explanation for actually what is going on here. It's like, so how did this happen? Okay, how did this happen? So if you look carefully, right, this here is the King James Version, right? Okay, but now if you go to the New International Version, right? Sorry, go there. If you go to the New International Version, it says at the end of 4 years, not 40, right? And it actually makes a footnote. The footnote is here. It says that the word that the number 40 only occurs in some Septuagint manuscripts. The Syriac, it's Josephus lists it as 40 years, and in the Hebrew. Now, when we say the Hebrew, we're not talking about the original Hebrew. We're talking about the Masoretic texts, which are from between 7th and 10th century is when is the origin of the Masoretic texts, which are Hebrew texts, but not the original Hebrew texts. I mean, a lot of that, if I'm not mistaken, have been lost to us. So 4 years, if it's 4 years, it's not a contradiction. If it's 40 years, it is a contradiction, right? So essentially, the contradiction is and is not. It actually depends on which version you are reading, right? And depending on, and there is actually footnotes in the version that tells you, listen, in these manuscripts over here it says this, and most people know that this is how anyone who reads the Bible in general will know that as you're reading the Bible, sometimes you have footnotes where they're saying, listen, in these manuscripts it says this, and in those so in general, this is not something that is hidden. It's very open. We know about these. It's in our Bible, in the footnotes or in the margin. There's a little commentary where it says, well, in that manuscript it says this, in that manuscript it says that, and then all the information is laid out to you so that you can sort of assess and have a look at it, and so on and so forth. So it's a contradiction. This is a tough one. So you can grant the objection that there is a contradiction, but only if you're reading translations that are based on certain texts, right? And not actually a whole heck of a lot of texts. It's only the Septuagint, which is a very, make no mistake, is a very, very prominent translation, but it's not all of the Septuagint manuscripts. It's only some of them, right? And then your Syriac, and then Josephus mentions it, and then in the Masoretic text, right? So to say that it's a contradiction, yes, but it's not a contradiction that actually occurs in the overwhelming majority of our ancient texts. The majority of our texts would actually say 4 rather than 40. But even if it wasn't the case, even if that wasn't necessarily the case, it actually doesn't really matter, because we actually have, logically, we do know the correct number of years, sort of thing. And we find that this goes through other translations as well. So for example, I've got a Portuguese translation over here, o livro, which means the book. Ao cabo de 4 anos, Absalom disse ao rei. So, 4 over here is 4, So if you go to other languages as well, depending on which texts that they're using, in Portuguese, Absalom is 4 anos. So that's 4. Absalom disse ao rei, deixe-me ir até o Hebron para fazer sacrifício ao Senhor, em cumprimento de voto que lhe fiz quando estava em Geshur, e que era que, se pudesse regressar a Jerusalém e apresentar holocausto. Alright, my Portuguese accent is absolutely rubbish, because I barely speak it anymore. So for those of you who are Portuguese and you're laughing your heads off, yeah, go ahead, right? That's fine. But yeah, I barely speak Portuguese anymore to anyone. Living in the UK, married to an English-speaking lady, it gets rusty, doesn't it? So, but anyway, the point is made. 4 over here, and if I actually go to one of the other Portuguese translations as well, right? Oops, I went too far. So there we go. Almeida Revista e Corrigida, 2009. E aconteceu, pois, ao cabo de 40 anos. So over here, 40 is 40. All right, is 40, 40 anos. So over here, they've got it as 40. The other one, they had it as 4. Nova tradução. Let's have a look in Portuguese. 4 anos depois. Over here, 4 is 4. 4 anos depois. So we have these, so when the atheist is making the objection, it needs to be known that they're picking. Let's put it this way: if we had to reverse the roles, right, and we said something about, let's say, an atheist document, right, where there was a discrepancy, but only in some of their things, we would be accused of cherry picking. Right, so if the atheist wants to cherry pick and only use the documents that prove their thesis, but if you're dealing with it honestly, yes, there is a contradiction in some. No, there's no contradiction in others, and generally speaking, even if it was a contradiction in all of them, it actually wouldn't matter. It wouldn't affect our doctrine at all. Okay, not in the slightest. So that's not an issue at all, not at all. So how did this happen? Well, how do we explain? The usual. I mean, it's the usual culprits. For example, could have been a mistranslation, because if you go to the Hebrew, The Hebrew words are very, very similar. In fact, they pronounce almost identically. I believe the word is arba, right? 40 is arba or arba, and then 4 is also arba, but with a slight for those of you that speak more than one language, sometimes the only thing that differentiates two words is a slightly different inflection in one of the words as you pronounce it. So if you're a non-native Hebrew speaker, for example, and someone says the word erba, right? You could quite easily not know the difference between the number 4 and the number 40. So, you know, and even written down, it might be similarities. It could have been a miscopy, you know, as people are translating it to different languages. A copyist error, translation error. Could have been a number of different things because, you know, at the end of the day, human beings are fallible. And so that's the case. So, do we have a contradiction? Yes, but only in some of the texts, not in all of the texts. Why did it happen? Well, it's not people being silly or trying to be whatever the case might be, deceitful, anything like that. Easily done problem. So, you know, should we give it to them? Maybe, you know, I don't know. Should we be generous and give them this one? You know, let's put it this way, right? We're eight down, so it's currently 8-0, 8-0 against atheists, right? They're currently standing at 0 points. So maybe, you know, for the sake of being magnanimous, maybe we give them 1 point. So let's say 8-1, okay? So you guys got a bit of catching up to do. We'll see how it goes. Anyway, ladies and gentlemen, that is it. I will see you again soon if my voice doesn't disappear, because it completely disappeared last week as well. It had no voice. And oh man, I hope I get better soon. But anyway, for those of you Christians listening to this, pray for me. I really need to get over this because I'm coughing. It prevents me from sleeping. It's awful. Anyway, ladies and gentlemen, I thank you for your viewership. Please, if you enjoyed this video, if you enjoy what I'm doing, go to my video on YouTube and hit the like button and hit the subscribe button, or even leave a comment, right? Even if it's just thank you or any little comment, because when the YouTube algorithms are doing their thing, they will look at those factors, you know, that, oh, people are actually engaging with this video there and must be helpful, therefore let's show other people, you know. So that'll help you, or that's all it needs, just a little thumbs up or whatever, just to let YouTube know, listen, we like this and we think other people should see it, you know. It's that simple. Anyway, other than that, ladies and gentlemen, God bless. Thank you very much. Take it easy and cheerio.